Hey there, it's Kim Elizabeth, your friendly realtor, coming at you with some exciting news. Today, I have a special guest with me, the one and only Craig Johnson from Canopy Mortgage. Craig and I have been having a really fun time. We are diving deep into the current real estate market, exploring many options for both sellers and buyers. Join us as we discuss and provide our opinions on this subject. If I have a buyer or a seller and they're not sure if they should buy or sell,
Right.
then in this market, both of our question is, everybody wants to know what are their options.
They do. Right. They want to know what their options are. And there are such a, multitude of options that it can be overwhelming and confusing.
Yes.
Because it is overwhelming. And because so many people in today's market, there's so much information just on life, right? I mean, when we go to the internet today, right? Social media.
And you can find complete opposite opinions, then you can agree with both sides. Like, oh,
you can.
This one sounds right to me, and also this one sounds right. Which one is true?
And because I don't do this for a living, and I always tell people too, I said, whatever field that you're in, and obviously you do that daily, that's your routine, so you are extremely comfortable with making those decisions, whatever they may be, right? And whatever type of decision, it doesn't have to be some monumental, oh my God, this is big. Just, it's what you do. It's
every day.
Every
what
day.
What am I eating for breakfast?
Yeah.
What car am I driving?
Absolutely. I mean, we jump in the shower, we pretty much shower the same way.
Right.
I mean, that's part of the deal. So when I'm thinking about spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, it was overwhelming for Sherry and I the very first time we did it.
It is overwhelming. And as someone that represents buyers are totally overwhelmed when they see, interest rates make it so I'm not sure, is my payment going to be affordable? Can I get a better deal? Do I listen to someone online that's telling me I can do this, but doesn't have proof?
Right.
Or what do I do?
I think that's the biggest thing is trying to find the proof that you need to make that decision, so that obviously you don't want to make a bad decision. Nobody does, right? No one wakes up and go, let's make a bad decision today, especially when you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? So I think it's really, really important that you take time and vet the team and make sure that you've got the right team in place. And so how would you do that? Well, I know it's biased because it, weighs to our side, if you will, but I would look at how long that person's been doing that job for, right? And kind of the relation that I draw in that statement. And I know, in your past life, you had a medical, presence for sure.
I was a nurse.
Yes, ma'am. So if I'm going to go have open heart surgery, right, I'm going to make sure that even though the open heart surgeon might be, 2 to 5 years into it, even 10 years, and really have studied and done a good job, if I'm going to go talk to somebody who's done it for 25 to 30 years, I'm going to think that 25 to 30-year veteran should know, right?
Well, the other thing though is, do they have options that are up to date? Right? Do they have options that can help me make this?
Are they antiquated, doing things the old way? Right.
If they're all paper and pencil records and
totally agree.
Do everything the old-fashioned way, that sometimes that has value. I'm not saying it's wrong, considering we're not young people.
Absolutely.
But we not only have the experience, but then we have the knowledge because we keep up to date and we try and stay on top of programs that help both our buyers and our sellers.
Because in the market that we're in, obviously we are, even though, I'm buyer centric, if you will, in this environment we're in today, really got to be seller centric because it's so important to help the seller see how that they can obtain their goal and still making their house attractive, affordable, right? Because that's the problem that we're having, is back kind of full circle, is that we've got so much media out there today talking about high rates, and I get it. There are high rates. I'm not saying rates aren't high, but in the same time, even though we have high rates, as you had shared earlier, there are absolutely opportunity in today's market. Structuring the financing the right way so that both buyer and seller can both win. Because we do. I mean, I want to have your sellers get as much net as they want, right? For sure. And the buyer pay fair price, you know, and then be able to obtain financing that they can afford and not be house poor. So I think if we're doing those things and we're conscious of that, and then just like making a video, I mean, that kind of steps us out. I mean, I know there's a lot of people that do video and messaging, and that's all well and good. But to your point, we're kind of on the other side of the fence. We're not 35 or 40 years old, that's for sure. But being able to embrace that technology. So it just goes to that we're going to stay up on, you know, opportunities and the changes in the environment. And thank goodness both of us really have always embraced technology, for sure. I know, boy, has it had such a role in lending, you know, and it allows us to literally turn over an approved buyer from the time that I get a full loan, you know, income, asset, credit, full application. Within literally 24 hours, we can tell the buyer, you the agent, we can even let the seller know that they're fully approved, right?
And right now in this market, I mean, that just reminded me, we are seeing more properties that don't get to closing. And that's not the seller's fault.
No.
That's, you know, that's because there's issues with the buyer, right? So being proactive and having a team that knows how to check for all the things proactively and making sure that that buyer is
fully approved, subject to appraisal.
Willing and able. Subject to appraisal.
Subject to appraisal and title. That, you know, those are the two things that we're going to conquer all the time. We're going to do everything else. We're going to be subject to appraisal and title. But even on the appraisal side, depending on the loan and how the financing is put together, we can still do things for what I like to call appraisal gap. Because sometimes even in this environment, right, we're having some challenges with appraisal gap. So we can restructure things accordingly, again, depending on what type of financing is being put together, and offer an alternative, again, so that, you know, seller gets what they need, buyer gets what they need, and again, both parties are happy to be able to do the transaction and close it. Because, you know, I don't think you ever want to get in a situation where you get to the closing table and one party, God forbid if both parties are just upset about being, and we both have experienced that at times, very rarely, but have had those moments, you know, where people are frustrated, and, you know, no one wants to be a part of that, for sure.
Okay, so as a lender, you're very well versed in helping the buyer find the best route for them, helping make it affordable. But in this time where sellers are nervous about selling, they want, you know, what they want, and they don't know how to help the buyer be able to want to buy their home and think it's affordable, right? So you're saying that you have a plan that helps the seller kind of maneuver that course.
Absolutely, because I think it's interesting. Over the course of the last, I'd say 12 months, I've had the opportunity to be able to be a part of more listing presentations in trying to help that seller see the opportunity versus just dropping price. I think that's the unfortunate. I mean, again, that's something that has been done in our industry forever. I mean, you know, I've been at it for 26 years. So it's always been, well, if it hasn't sold, drop the price. If it hasn't sold, drop the price. Which may not be the actual go-to, because we still have an inventory issue that we've not solved. That's been the interesting thing. If people want to get information, obviously we've got a bunch of it that we can share and specific to each individual, but home prices have really stayed sturdy. We haven't, and we're not going to see a fall off the cliff. It's not going to happen.
We've seen just little tiny down dips, just to kind of, we had that craziness,
right?
And then, but they're staying pretty steady. I mean, they are a little bit tiny dipping down, but it's nothing major.
No, not at all. I mean, I don't even think it's 5%. I mean, it's not even close to that. We're talking 2 or 3% maybe. And the feeling that all of a sudden too, buyers kind of sitting on the fence, waiting for the great deal, right, to come through. Again, we go back to, we have an inventory issue. And that all started with the Great Recession back in 08 and 09, when for literally about 7 to 8 years, all the big builders stopped building. They literally, there was not a home built for a good 5 to 6 years at all. And then they started to creep in and started to build more. But what happened during that time, and you and I had young children at that time frame, right? They started to grow up, and now they're grown up, and now they're forming their own households. Right. So we have household formation, another generation coming to the market, and we didn't build homes for them.
I mean, not only that, but on top of that, right now we're in Grayson County, and if anybody's familiar with Sherman and Grayson County, we're getting all kinds of industry, tech industry, and the population is going to almost double in 2 years. Yeah. So that's a lot of people coming in. Anybody in this whole region is going to see, we need more houses. We need more houses on the market, and we need more houses for sale for people to live in.
We do, and the problem lies there is that the one thing the builders learn through that pain point of that time frame is that if they're not building homes, they control inventory. So don't think for a minute that all of a sudden those guys are going to ratchet up their building to meet this high demand. No. They'll keep the building at a certain level that will allow prices to continue to move up. That's what it's going to be. I mean, they sit around in those boardrooms.
Because when you have more demand, you have increased prices.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's supply and demand, economy 101, right? Econ 101.
Right at this moment, we're almost balanced in this area, in this region. Now, I know different places around the Metroplex that I'm familiar with are a little different, but we're almost balanced as far as there's a little negotiation room for buyers, and the seller can work to get what they want if it's within reason, which is part of my job, right? Showing them 100%. This is what your house should sell for.
Right, and then from the financing side, supporting that with the right numbers, right? That allows both buyer and seller to see on paper how that can work out for both of their interests. And if it meets the interests of both parties, cool, we'll put a deal together. If not, try to negotiate a little bit more. And if we just can't get there, maybe we just can't get there. And that's okay. Everybody just needs to move on and take another step forward and not get overly frustrated, even though obviously we know, and to the folks that would watch us, this is one of the biggest things, so it's also one of the most emotional things that people do.
Buying and selling, it's always emotional.
It is. So as I try to be strategic and analytical, right, because I'm working with numbers, I am very conscious that there is a great deal of emotion, right, behind it. I mean, simply, Sherry and I we'll celebrate 38 years in June. We have 3 kids and 10 grandchildren, and watching our kids, just like you watch your kids, go through the process of life, right? And so, the bigger the thing is, the more emotion comes with it, right? So I've always told people, getting married, having children, buying and selling homes. Those are kind of the big three, right?
Okay, so the other thing that kind of reminded me of going back to the question of should I buy, right?
Right.
So when you buy a home, every payment you make is an investment.
It is,
right?
100%.
It's going towards your equity. It's not paying off this ginormous debt. It's an investment.
You're paying yourself.
Right.
You're literally paying yourself. If anyone is familiar with, if you've ever taken a loan on a 401k, right? And you're paying your 401k back.
Right.
That's the best loan you can get, because who are you paying back?
Right.
Yourself.
Right.
Buying a home is the exact same thing. You take that loan out, to your point, now I'm making that payment. The principal is going in my bank account.
Right.
Every single month. So we've got that, through amortization. And then obviously with appreciation, and we talked about obviously a limited supply and demand. I would bet for at least the next 5 years, we're gonna be at least 4% or better in appreciation year over year. So if I buy a $300,000 home, in the first year, I've made $12,000. I don't know where you're gonna be able to do that as a hardworking family, getting started. Maybe you've already started and this is your first home now, which is totally great. But man, you got a ways to be able to get to $12,000.
Oh, yeah.
I can do it in 1 year for you, right? Yeah, I mean, and so we go 3 years out, $36,000.
Yeah.
And when we take the amortization part, we've paid that loan down. We've been making that principal payment back to me.
Right.
So now that 36 now becomes $42,000 in 3 years.
Right. And then I know that people's budgets are really tight, but I like to make sure people understand if they can even stretch it a little further to get that the amount of one payment a year in.
Sure.
Extra.
Yeah.
That is dramatic in what it does.
It will.
To their interest, right?
It will. It'll have a profound effect. I usually look at that when we talk to someone who would say, this is going to be our forever house, right?
Our forever
home. We're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Obviously, I know from my side, and I know you do too, we do a lot of first-time home buyer stuff, right? So usually that first-time home buyer, when we're talking to them, we're really talking about the idea, put me in the game, coach.
Yes, so they got their foot in the door.
Get in the game.
Then they save up the money through their equity in their home.
Right.
To be able to buy the next step. Their kids are bigger, or they have more kids, or they want to live in a different neighborhood or a different town. Then they have the money to do that next step. Sell their home and they have the equity.
And sell their home could be an option, but every
lots of options.
Yeah, every time that we're going to look at starting a first-time home buyer, we always have forward thinking, right? So we're going to take care of you today,
right?
But we're going to ask that we start to think 3 to 5 years down the road, because I always tell people jokingly, people do not want to live in tents. People want to live under a roof, right? So those that own the most roofs will make the most money. And you can go anywhere online and see the generational wealth that institutions have collected, right, over time.
Yeah.
So, but all those people typically started with their first home.
Right.
They started with one.
Right.
So if we get to start with one home, let's figure out how we can take that home, to your point, leverage that.
Right.
Right? So that maybe we could keep that, turn that into the rental, and go get the bigger primary.
Right.
home.
Or buy a rental and stay in the home they love.
Whatever that, yes ma'am, 100%. So I think there's just great opportunity. And again, I like to say, this is like learning a foreign language, right? I mean, it's just so much out there. And if, anybody just wants to have a little bit of fun, just Google, how do I buy my first home? Woo! It'll just dazzle you to the point where you're like, I don't know if I want to buy my first home.
Yeah.
Because there's so much there.
Plus, okay, when you do that, the first thing when you Google like that, the first at least 3, if not 10, are ads.
Right.
And some of them are multiple ads by the same company, just written different ways.
Yes.
But then there's ads that completely give opposite opinions.
Right.
This is what you can afford. This is what you should have a payment. This is what your house, if you bought a $300,000 house, your payment should be $600 or some crazy number.
Right.
Because it's not.
Well, I would say 90% of the time the payment is off because, again, 90% of the calculators out there do not put in, they either don't put in property taxes and homeowners insurance at all, number one. Yeah. And 2, if they put it in, they put the wrong amount in.
Right.
So when they talk to a lender and then the lender tells them what their payment is, they're like, oh my God, Google said this. So right away, you've created conflict.
The other thing I think it does is it says, oh, the interest rate today is,
yes,
and calculates that. But interest rates are based on that person's credit and all that assets and all that stuff.
Income, all those
and
things.
so each person's interest rate is going to be different.
It is.
Even with the same lender. It
can be,
because they just have a different
Their package will be different.
Yeah, different package, right?
Yeah,
and plus there's different loans and they carry different interest rates. And
right.
You might qualify for one kind and not another.
Right. Well, and I just draw back to the idea, because I think, one big event would always be going to have surgery, right?
You're really stuck on that subject today.
I am. But obviously health is so important for sure. It's one of those big things for sure. But just like a great doctor has, kind of a base of where he or she may start to be able to create a plan for a patient.
Right.
So I think, we all start with a base of kind of the direction that we may go in. But once we gather that information, I'll go into my coaching mode. So once I start to see what an athlete can and can't do, then we might change the plays to adjust for that athletic ability.
Right.
It's the same thing when we're going to look at your finances. We're going to look at, like you said, credit, income, and assets. Depending on what that is, depending on what the goals are of that person, will be dependent on what we will or won't do, right? And it doesn't mean we're not going to offer them to look at everything. I think that's the other part too. I think too often from my side, on the lending side, we're, here's the interest rate, there's the payment, there we go.
Right.
And we haven't walked somebody through the journey.
Yeah.
Now some people just want interest rate and payment. Totally fine. That's all well and good. But I think if we're doing the biggest thing that we do besides marriage and having children, we got to go a little bit beyond.
Yeah.
And I would say, the higher percentage of people want to feel confident in making that decision. So they're going to want information that supports what we're doing. So.